Welcome back to Your Average Witch, where we talk about witch life, witch stories, and sometimes a little witchcraft. Today we meet Roan. Roan talks about life in Appalachia, tattoos, and trans acceptance. Before we get started with the interview, I just wanted to thank a listener, Andrea. I follow her on Instagram, and I saw that she was collecting rose hips one day, and I expressed envy because I don't know how well roses will grow here in Arizona. She volunteered to send me some, and when it got here, she had included some gorgeous soaps. They have cute little planchettes on top, and they smell amazing. When I opened the package, lavender just whacked me right in the face. It smells great. She also sent me a lovely letter, which I'm calling a review. And she says, I'm super impressed by your podcast interviews. They are so much more personal than anything else I have heard because you ask all of the questions all of us are thinking. Keep up the good work and fun. Excited to see where this venture takes you. Thanks so much, Andrea, both for sending me a package, which was definitely not necessary and very much appreciated, and for the kind words. I hope to continue to bring even more witches into the spotlight next year. Now let's get to the stories. Hello, Roan. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to
be
meet
here.
you. Oh, yay. Would you please introduce yourself to everybody? Let them know who you are, if you give yourself any sort of a label as to what kind of witch you are, or any other kind of label if you want, and pronouns if you want to throw those out there, and let people know where they can find you.
Awesome. So my full name is Jasper Roan Campbell, or JR for short. So I go by all three. I like to say that I give everyone options, and you can just pick one, see what sticks. My pronouns are both he, him, and they, them, meaning that anyone can use both interchangeably or separately. Over the years, I've honestly come to know myself as many things. A lot of it is being that I'm a non-binary intersex person. I'm a queer person. I'm a rural Southern Appalachian. I'm autistic, and I am what many people would commonly recognize as a witch. And of course, that list isn't exhaustive, and there are others that I'm still learning to be confident in existing publicly within. But I would say that practice has taught me there's immense power in naming and claiming things that belong to myself, even when there's a risk of being used against me.
Do you have socials that you want to share?
So, socials, I was actually I don't really exist very much on social media, but I'm actually trying to change that because I right now exist on an island and have been very solitary, both in my practice, but in my just, secular life. And that's something I struggle with. I'm a very anxious, not really anxious, but kind of just like socially nervous person.
I'm anxious.
Yeah. Which I'm really glad to find that there are a lot of other people out there that's so common with.
Yeah, if you sneak up behind us and touch us on the shoulder, we'll jump.
Hey, that is just honestly an added bonus. It makes everything spicy. Yeah. So, and that's honestly something I've been trying to find in my own personal practice as well. Is I've been a solitary practitioner for, I would say, about 15 years now. If I were saying that I am officially practicing, but when does anyone ever like officially start practicing? Probably longer than that though. So probably the most social I get in my life is just interacting with like my group of friends and also folks that I've come to know that's also, witchy and eclectic and really just have an air of spirituality around them.
What does it mean when you call yourself a witch? What does that mean to you?
It means quite a lot to me, and sometimes I find it evolving over time, or even sometimes I sit down and go, what does that mean? There's a lot of different things, but firstly, it means self-empowerment. I was raised as an evangelical fundamentalist Christian. Don't really know how sometimes I am related to my family. Or even how it's like, look at my path forward and I'm like, this is where I've ended up.
I know that line.
But I think it's been empowering for myself just to be able to claim something as my own and to really shape it as my own, like, taking your hands to a piece of clay and being like, I could really actually make this into whatever. And secondly, I think it means that I'm there for others as much as I am myself. I really try my best to be accessible however I can. Since I exist within many communities that experience discrimination and at times social exclusion, this often means we have much less access to resources in many ways than a lot of other people. So my services that, I assist other people with are either free or at a cost that will cover materials needed. And outside of this, I still remain committed to accessibility for anyone by reducing barriers for others as much as I have the power to do so. And then finally, I think it means a lifelong commitment to education in many facets, nature conservation, and activism.
Goals. I feel like such a schmo whenever I ask people these questions.
Why is that? Let's think about that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm always like, I am constantly asking why. I think I've done that ever since I was a little kid. I think annoyingly so. Being like, why is that? I honestly annoy myself sometimes with it, but I think it can be very helpful. Like, how does this work? Trying to figure it out.
Everybody else has these good answers that sound like so noble and full of service. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I like rocks.
Hey, and you can like rocks, but whenever you pull on a thread, just like I like rocks, and you keep pulling that thread out, sometimes you're like, whoa, there's a lot more here than I realize. I will be honest, even just like listening to your podcast and listening to all the other wonderful people talking about themselves, I was very nervous. And I'm always very upfront with being nervous, because if I can point at the elephant in the room, it makes me much more comfortable. So, I listen to this, folks. I'm like, wow, dang, I don't really know if I can come up with really cool stuff like that. I'm just kind of your average backwoods witch out in the hedge in Appalachia in a holler somewhere. So
a holler. That makes me so happy to hear.
Thank you. But yeah, I think, even just like talking about the elephant in the room aspect, that's also a part of my spirituality and my magical work. Also in my personal life, I am a member of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
Yay!
Yeah. So some people do know what that is. Other people, I also find that, especially in the South, like I walk up to people and I'm like, hi, I'm a member of SBI, or I am a sister, I'm a queer nun. And they're like, what the heck is that?
Well, to be honest, it's because I know Corey.
Right. Well, honestly, Corey is one of the best, and they are someone I look up to extremely in my life. I'm very lucky to have them as a family member. That's one of the things that we constantly tell people when we're out and about, is that if I can show up looking like this, so what a queer nun is that, I mean, it can be many things, but in my practice is that I constantly dress up in my practice and I look like, like an anime girl, or I look like a very ridiculous rainbow, or I just wear like all of these very odd things. And I'm like, if I can look this way and exist in this space, and there's space enough for me to be peaceful and exist here, so can anyone else.
Oh no,
and
my
it instantly
heart
seems to calm people. Yeah, and it's like, if I can have the audacity to be here like this, anyone can exist here.
Everybody needs some damn audacity.
Yeah. Absolutely. My partner and I are constantly saying that. So one time we were watching this really good, what was it? It was some kind of thing, but there was this man in an office, and he had this poster. It's like one of those inspirational posters, and above him it just said, "Have the audacity." It was like, I need that poster.
Yeah.
Just have some audacity, I think a good dash fits good.
I have an audacity story. It's kind of
dumb.
Oh,
yeah.
My best friend and I
honestly, kind of dumb ones are the best.
This is embarrassing. So
that's how you know it's good, if it starts that way.
Oh, this is a podcast about stories, so here we go. My best friend, this is when I lived in El Paso, and my best friend Anne came and we would come to Tucson to like escape El Paso because I didn't like it there. And Tucson was
Yeah.
fun and relatively close. And so we got matching tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want something to remind me to be courageous and brave and awesome.
Yeah.
And we chose audacity. And I said, Anne, you're French because she's French. What's the
Mm-hmm.
French word for audacity? And she's like, I don't know. Let me call my aunt. And so we called her aunt, who said it was audacité with an E at the end, with an accent over the E. And guess what? That's not right. This
Oh
doesn't mean anything.
no.
This is not a word. It's just audace. Like,
But
I think that's that. So I have this misspelled, and I have another misspelled word on my other arm in another language. I'm that guy.
yeah, well, have the audacity. So
Yeah, I'm gonna say it like that from now on. She got
I
her
mean,
tattoo covered up. She betrayed me.
well, have the audacity to have audacity on your body, it will remind you.
Yeah,
What is
check
a
your
better reminder
spelling.
than that? Yes, and to check your spelling, but
Oh my gosh. Maybe stop putting foreign words on your word languages you don't speak. Quit doing that. Just quit doing that because you look like a dumbass.
Yeah.
Twice on each side.
Honestly, that's a great story. I love that. Well, I also kind of have a tattoo story. So on the backs of my calves, I have both the Brienne of Tarth from Game of Thrones, and I have the Hound, and they are my favorite characters out of that series. And I got them, and I would say about a year later, that disastrous ending happened.
Oh.
And yeah. But they say, I'm no sir, I'm no lady, but it's really to remind myself, I am an intersex person. I have existed outside of binaries for a long time, but also to have strength in that. I think with that, it was just like, I was like, oh yes, I love these characters. I love these tattoos. They're fantabulous portraits made by this great artist here. And then that happened, and the only thing people say to me now, they're like, man, that ending sucks. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Trust me, I get it.
Oh, damn them.
Right. Tattoos are very permanent.
Man,
But I
God.
love them so. I'm one of those people that
I still think it sounds cool.
oh, thank you.
Plus, if it's good art, I mean, I'll still look at it and like it.
Right. I'm like, it don't matter if it's good
And yet
art.
those characters are still badass and they didn't do anything dumb.
Yeah.
Other than maybe die at the end. Maybe. I don't even remember. But they didn't do that dumb crap.
Definitely. And also, if there's anyone listening that loves Game of Thrones, I much prefer the stories in the TV show over the books. I've not read the books. My
Really?
partner has read the books. Yeah, but I think that some of the characters that I like are significantly different in the books. So but that's just my opinion, like, what's his name? That's just my opinion, man.
It's been wiped from my brain because that ending enraged me. So I was just like,
Yeah.
that doesn't exist anymore. Next.
Right. It's like, all right, what's the next thing that's not going to disappoint me?
Like the
I
L
don't
word
need
and
friends.
Lost.
Right. It's like, I don't need friends. They disappoint me. Like, thanks. But I love tattoos and I want to keep getting them. I think I'm one of those people that not only is it like I think that also like connects to my like spiritual practice too. And it's really weird. Like the more that you pull on those strings, the more you find in your life that you do every day that you're like, that ain't witchy or that ain't spiritual. You're like, wait a minute. Wait, it is.
Everything is.
Yeah, it all connects to each other. I'm constantly telling my friends, I'm like, have you ever just really sat in a field and looked at the sky and thought about how things are connected, man? I'm just like, okay, all right. It's time to go eat some lunch or something. I don't know.
Do you have daily rituals or daily practice? And would you share them with us if you do?
Yeah, so I would say that I probably used to be a lot more rigid in my daily practices, but now it's really up to I try to infuse a little bit of witchiness or a little bit of spirituality, my own, into whatever I do, whether that be just like listening to a podcast or whenever I'm cooking, I have special herbs that I keep in my spice cabinet. Especially whenever I'm with friends, I break the good herbs out. Not the ones from the dollar store. I go top shelf. Not that dollar shelf, dollar store is bad. It's just I have some like
Sometimes you like to feel fancy.
yeah, and I actually even so I have stuff like salt that I've gotten specifically from a mom and pop shop that produces salt from a cave in Appalachia.
Oh, what?
Um, yeah, yeah. I was I found that one time and I was like, "Well, dang, I'm ordering some of this." But I use stuff like that. Like whenever my friends come over on the weekends, or like if I go take a dish to someone who is feeling ill or something. I used to really think I have a very rigid thought process sometimes, and I'm like, if I'm not sitting down and I'm lighting a candle and I'm saying intentions, or I am doing this entire thing, it is not magical practice. But the more that I live and learn, and that we all have things going on in our lives, we can't really always stop as much as we would like. You can still keep going and just infuse those things into whatever you're doing, just however you want. So, yeah.
Did you grow up with witchcraft in your life?
I would say a younger me would say no, but an older me definitely says yes, because it might not have been called that, but it was definitely that. So I come from like evangelical fundamentalism, which is very staunchly no witchcraft allowed. But however, a lot of my older family members, especially from Appalachia, have folk practices. And whenever I started realizing like they're very related to just spirituality, loose spirituality, as well as just honestly just the practice of witchcraft, the practice of doing magic, doing magical workings with intention, which to me that is also like the definition of doing magic is doing something with intent,
Yeah.
um, to influence something, to change, or to even just like not even just change, but to just put your thing on it, like. And my family, I started reading letters from them that from like my great 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 grandmother, from like my grandfathers practiced a lot of different folk magic things without, I don't even think them realizing it. They wouldn't call it that, but it was definitely that because they were farmers. And they were not even just farmers, but just like, they worked on the railroad. They did all sorts of things like working for the post office, working for the railroad, whenever that was a thing. They worked on the family farm to sustain themselves and their community and all of those kinds of stuff. So, like reading back through their books, or even just like audio files. I have some of them now from my grandfather, but him just telling
Cool.
stories. Yeah. And I was like, wow, it's actually, there's a lot of that. I even have, luckily, a newspaper clipping from like the early 1900s that was talking about my like third great grandmother. And she was one of the only people in town that knew anything about like herbal salves, knew anything about like all sorts of like tinctures, things like that. But she had a herb garden that was massive, and she actually had a saddle that she would keep on her horse at all times. She would never take it off. And whenever someone would, call on her, even in the middle of the night, she would go and, make something up and take it to someone. Like, say, if they had like a fever to break, she would be the person they would call. And it was really like, it's definitely not Western medicine as we know it today, but it was definitely very folk practices, but very much like known in the community as she would just be able to go and like do those things, which I thought is great. I also recently found out her saddle that was kept on her horse is in a museum in Northeast Tennessee somewhere. So I need to go view it sometime. But yeah, like I don't know. I think it's just really cool how different practices just pervade everyday life. And even without us knowing it sometimes. I also come from, I have multiple different types of people in my family from a lot of different backgrounds. A lot of people who are immigrants, but also people who, who are indigenous, and things like, those practices coming together, melding together, and just seeing different evolutions over time that are then passed on, and they keep being passed on. And sometimes they change a little bit over time, but even just like seeing that kind of tempering. So kind of like whenever you take a sword and you temper the metal and you keep folding it in on itself, and like heating it up, and then like hammering it down, and then doing it over and over again, and how it changes, but it becomes stronger over time. I really think there's something about that as well. Can't always put my finger on it, but I think that is again part of a practice. Like practices, they
That's an
take you
interesting
forward.
way to think about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
I can't think of the real name. What is the real name? Like what people who aren't in it's not Valerian steel, but it's like Valerian steel. What is the
Yeah.
real name for that? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No, I get what you mean. Like the very hard, very tough metal.
But it has a
Yeah.
name because they use it's it's
Yeah.
real practice. Oh my gosh, what has happened to my head? Everyone go look up. Can't believe I
Go look
can't
up
remember what
Valerian steel and then go from there. No, just kidding. But yeah, no, I get that. It's I honestly don't know the name either. I just describe the practice in hopes that someone
I
will
know
go,
what
"Oh,
it is,
that's
but I
just like
can't
that."
oh, my brain is just doing something dumb. It's the good kind. It's got the waves in it. It's really pretty.
Yes.
Damascus.
Damascus. Yeah, Damascus steel.
Anyway, back to the point. It's fascinating to think of that, of witchcraft and practices being formed like that.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
would you say is your first experience with witchcraft?
So I would say my first official, like if I went to an event, would definitely be, I went to a Samhain event in Asheville, North Carolina, and I was a teenager. I drove myself over there and I was like, I am going to be with people. If I can do anything about it, I'm gonna do something with people. And I actually had brought a friend along with me that, they're like, all right, you're into all this witchy stuff, cool. But they were just like, I guess this is just a really cool part of your goth phase. Which, by the way, goth is not phase. It's what's in your heart that matters. I brought them along with me to Asheville, and we went to, I believe it's the Church of All Souls there. And now someone in Asheville can absolutely correct me because I would only go there every so often. But there, I cannot remember the folks that put them on, but it was a community event, and there were like so many different people from different practices, different walks of life that were present. And it was a beautiful ceremony, and that was like one of the first times I had gotten together with someone, or like with a group of people coming together for a common purpose, raising energy, and then you can feel it physically manifesting like on your skin. Like I could feel it, like it felt like champagne bubbles, it felt like hair raising, it felt like I was like, I've been in many churches in my lifetime. I've never felt anything like this before. And so did my friend. And they, they aren't, we're not a practicing witch or anything. They were like, but I can tell there's something going on. That is not just, all right, we're getting together and we are having a picnic, or we are, just shouting to the ceiling. But yeah, I think that really it was an eye opener for me. Especially the strength that comes with folks coming together and mashing their energies together, and really just finding like common ground and working together. So that really stuck with me.
Do you ever feel like you have imposter syndrome?
Yes.
And what do you do about that?
Imposter syndrome happens a lot, and I think it happens on a lot of different levels, specifically for myself. It happens in my magical practice in the fact that, insofar as I'm definitely a person that I have been hurt by others, without them thinking. I know how that feels. I know a lot of people do. I'm one of those people that I'm like, I don't want to do that to other people, you know?
Yeah.
And I think in some practices, specifically, not even really practice, I wouldn't even call it that. I would say it's whenever it's commercialized, those kinds of things, whenever people use it to be more of a, it's not even, I'm not even saying that you can't make money doing witchcraft. You definitely can. You can do it the right way. But it's really, so far as like, I have no other interest in this practice or in spirituality other than to make money from people. So then I will take other people's things and use them as my own, even without knowing
Yeah.
the context or things like that. So really, appropriation. I worry about that, for myself as well, because I've seen it happen to my folk practices, to people that I know, and I don't want to do it to other folks that I might not be so knowledgeable about. And also, like, as a queer person, as a trans person, non-binary person, imposter syndrome also seeps in, that it's like, just walking around in everyday life, people questioning who you are, like even to your core.
Yeah, I can't
Um,
even imagine. I mean, I can kind of, and it sucks.
yeah, well, I mean, even just like being a woman, that's that's like one point of that, like people
Kind of
questioning
garbage.
you. Yeah, being like, "Oh, do you really know that thing?" You're like, "Yes, I do actually."
Hmm. What's a
Here's
degree? What did I? Oh, what's my degree for? Oh, that's just for looks.
exactly. It's just a piece of paper that costs a lot of money, unfortunately. Yeah, and I think they're constantly mashing themselves together as well, but also kind of bouncing off of each other. And the way that I deal with that is I speak to other people that I really admire. I also do a lot of listening more than I do talking. Honestly, this is probably the most talking I've done in a long time. Um, but I think a good dose of listening, and not even just listening, but taking a step further and internalizing what you hear from other people, and really putting yourself as much as you can in their shoes to foster empathy and compassion and trying to work together with those folks. I think that that is also a source of power for myself and power in coming into my own, but also really just caring about other folks more than just, surface level, because I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like for those kinds of things to happen. Yeah. Hopefully that's an okay answer for that, or what you were looking for, but I think it's just a lot of different things all the time.
Are people thinking I'm looking for something? Somebody said that before, and it just like I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm just waiting. I'm just listening to you talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm listening. That's what I'm looking for you to tell your story.
And that's a good question. Like, are we looking for something? And are you looking for something? But I think a lot of us, myself very much included, is that I'm expecting other people to want something from me or to need something from
I
me
do
for
want something
moving
from
on.
everyone. I want to know. I want to know things because I'm a nosy person. That's
And
the truth. I'm nosy and I want to know what makes people tick.
oh, me too. Like, I think that's just like, I think you've spoken to this before, but just like getting in depth with people or with other, just with something that you're interested in, and just wanting to know more and more and more about it. I'm absolutely the same way. And I think I mean, personally, whenever I would go to the library whenever I was younger, I would check out like 30 books at a time.
Yeah.
And I would be like, I cannot get enough of this. I need to know more. And it really is just wanting to understand. But I also have heard the phrase that, we're all individually just the universe experiencing different parts of itself. I really like that. I really resonate with that idea. That even just like the act of you and I like speaking right now, just two different parts of the universe that's ever expanding, that is just continually experiencing itself. over and over again.
Here's something that bothers me. I hate when I get epiphanies during these. Part of it is obsessive compulsive disorder. Because the
Yeah.
more I know, the safer I am.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
annoying.
Oh yeah, I feel you. So I also have OCD.
I don't like it.
Um, yeah, I think it can be a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Yeah,
If
it
you're
is.
ever
It is. But
if you ever like fall into a
still.
Jeopardy show, you're like, I know a lot of these things.
Exactly. I know so much about so many things.
Exactly.
So many trivias.
But then you're like, oh, when does it stop? Sometimes it's exhausting.
Yeah. What would you say is your biggest struggle with your practice?
Ooh, so my biggest struggle, I think it's probably, I think it's twofold. It's really putting myself out there. I am terrified of putting myself out there just because there's been so many times that I do, and then I have good intentions.
Someone stomps all over you?
Yeah. hmm And really, I mean, even if it's a correction, I openly welcome corrections, especially whenever it comes to like, hey, actually, that is crossing the line a little bit. Like, this is a closed practice, like, please tell me more. And not, about how to respect that, about your boundaries. I want to know your boundaries. I want to know everyone's boundaries. I want them to know mine. It takes minimal effort to be able to come up to me and go, hey, Roan, this is a boundary and don't cross that. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're good. There's been a lot of times where, like what you just said, like it occurs in a stomping over method or maybe very severe. And I'm even saying that even within my own like communities and things like that, where even there's been sometimes I have been a bit severe with people in the past.
Well, we're human. I know I have been too.
Yeah. I think it can be very difficult to just kind of like pause for a moment and be like, what am I feeling right now? I'm feeling really, I mean, even whenever I feel like slighted by someone or I feel like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that, I really have to make myself pause for a minute and be like, I need to honor this feeling inside of myself, but maybe I should not immediately react and then come back to that person and then we'll have a convo. I have historically been not so great at that. But like you just said, I think that is a very human condition. It also just makes me terrified because, as I was saying earlier to you, I think even before we were recording, but I have PTSD. I have a lot of trauma in my past, and a lot of that goes pretty deep. So it might not even be the person talking to me in front of me, but it is reminding me of those things. So then my body just goes, oh, scary,
Yeah.
danger. So I think a lot of it is also just learning to, I wouldn't say overcome, but heal from that. And how can I have both things at the same time, like healing and also allow myself community and not be so afraid of that.
I know how. And it's going to
I am
happen
all
in a year
ears.
from now. It's going to happen in a year.
Absolutely. And that absolutely leads into like I've heard you talk about on Hana's purpose. I've heard other people, including my family member Corey, and it really is something that I've been looking for a long time. And I am so thankful to hear all of those stories from people that attended because it sounds like something a lot of us need.
It's
Um,
freaking life-changing.
yeah, I am so glad to hear that. Like, because even just having been a solitary practitioner, there's been multiple times where I tried to dip my toe back in the water and I'm like, nope, too hot. All right. you know, but it's mostly just because of, just different incompatibilities. But those incompatibilities are like, I don't even say incompatibilities, but just people being people,
Yeah,
myself
differences.
included. Yeah. Yeah. And they can be hard sometimes, but they don't have to be, I don't think.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I I also really enjoy Witch Bitch Amateur Hour and then talking about like getting on the airplane and things like that because I'm like that really humanizes that for me because it's something I also worry about. And I really make a big deal out of it, but I feel bad for it. I'm like, why should I feel bad? It's just a thing that happens, you know?
People are
Um,
afraid of or just unsettled by different things. I have no problem getting on a plane.
yeah.
I am not afraid during lightning storms,
Hmm.
but people terrify the shit out of me. Leaving my
Yeah.
house is terrifying, which is
Yeah.
dumb.
No, not dumb at all, honestly. Not dumb at all. I am also terrified to leave my house, but yet we still do it. I just sometimes I want to learn how to do it with less
Crippling anxiety.
yeah. Like, how do you tiptoe around that? You don't. Name it and claim it, baby. Yeah. And I think that is also powerful too, to like directly talk about like, hey, I have crippling anxiety right now. This is what I'm feeling. And to be surrounded by other people who understand that and they're not going to go, wow, okay, that's weird.
You're
I don't have
weird.
that. Yeah. Yeah. I'll even speak to that as being so I've recently been diagnosed, but something I've lived lifelong with is that I'm autistic. And that is something that I also work with other people in my secular life at work. I help other folks with disabilities find work because my professional training, my degree, all of that stuff is in human resource management. But I am lucky that I found community within that community as well, and that it is something not just to be ashamed of. Definitely not. It's actually empowering. It's a different perspective on things, on life. It's very much the difference between like operating systems, between like Windows OS and Mac OS. Just because I'm a Mac OS doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with me. It just means that I function differently. My files are in a different place, but Macs are really great at video design, at creating things, but Windows are also great at like other things as well. So I think coming into that and honoring that part about myself has been very helpful whenever it comes to just saying these are things I need and things I need to talk about, and let's just be open and honest about everything.
I'm experiencing that at work.
Yeah.
The job I have requires like kind of a weird skill set. And the people
Hmm.
who are good at it are really good at it. And I bet they're really bad at everything else. And I'm really good at it. And my husband, it makes him hate his life.
Yeah.
But I can't do the things he does. So it's just interesting to see the differences.
Oh
And I have
yeah.
not been diagnosed officially, and I'm not trying to pay all the money to get a diagnosis. But I do believe that I am also somewhere in that arena.
Absolutely. And that's something we can talk about honestly for a whole other episode, is just barriers to entry, or not even entry, but like, just barriers and access
To
to
diagnoses.
diagnoses. Yeah, especially as okay, I do not identify as a woman, but I was raised as a woman. I am, and I use this for myself, I'm an AFAB person, which means assigned female at birth, especially when it comes to neurodivergency. So whether it be, OCD, whether it be autism, ADHD, uh, people who are assigned female at birth, or who were raised as a woman, or who are women, have a really hard time getting diagnosed.
Well,
Their
we're so
diagnoses are
suppressed as
missed.
children as to who we're allowed to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, you need to be this, or else.
Ladies
So,
don't do that. Okay, well, I'm 9, ma'am.
right. Like, I'm not even a lady yet. What are you talking about?
Even if I grow up to be a lady, I'm not a lady now.
Right. I am a child. That is what I identify as, is I am a child. Definitely. And personally, I absolutely validate self-diagnosis for those reasons, specifically for access. But I think there is a lot of value in people knowing themselves and doing research for themselves. And even just coming from a trans perspective, you know who you are. And no one else really has a say on that. You know who you are. And I think we don't do nearly enough as a society to validate people whenever they to their core, because you spend all of the time, you're the person that spends the most time with you every day, to just really know things about themselves without someone else having to tell them, like, this is who you are and this is what you do.
But it's such a weird search. I didn't know until I was in my mid-30s who I was.
Yeah.
And yet you're expected to get a job, choose a career like out of high school, and probably get married and have a kid by then.
Yeah.
That's batshit. Society is
Yeah.
stupid.
Right. It is. It's like, maybe I just want to sit around, in a forest somewhere and cry and eat cake. I don't know.
Hello. Goals.
Right. Like, maybe I just want to, like, F off to my little cottage out in the woods and just do whatever the heck I want. Okay. And it doesn't even have to be like, I just want to surround myself with folks that feel that way too, that it's like, if wherever you are at in life, that's where you are and that's okay. But also, want to prize things like learning without, I don't know, like learning without boundaries meaning like, you can't do that because you're X, like meaning like, oh, you can't learn that because you're a woman, or like, you can't be in this space because you're transgender, or because you're, a BIPOC person, or even just because you're neurodivergent. Like, you can't be in an office. My first diagnosis, I got misdiagnosed once, and then I went to another practitioner. But my first diagnosis told me I was not autistic because I had a career, and actually because I wanted a job. And mind you, my job at the time is I help folks with autism find jobs. So I'm like, well, that's not true, And they told me
that's super annoying.
Right. And because I have a partner, and we've been together for 4 years, because I have a degree and all of these arbitrary things. And they were like, that's why, you scored high on all of these tests.
It's incredibly insulting.
Yeah. And I found, luckily, in our area, a psychologist who is also neurodivergent. He is autistic, and he's like, that's all bullshit. He actually laughed whenever I told him what they told me. He's like, that is, wow. So
that person sounds like a real dipshit.
Right. And no wonder that we go through life being like, well, I'm too afraid to go outside, or like, I'm too afraid to participate socially, because there's just like all these things happening all the time like that, where it's like, you can't be here because of that.
You're not who you are.
Yeah. Or you don't even know who you are. Whenever it's like, actually, I do. Do you know who I am? Have we talked before? Hi, let me introduce myself. Yeah. So,
what do you think is the biggest motivator in your practice?
Ooh, I would say that's a very deep question. Biggest motivator in my practice, I think it'd be hard to choose just one. I definitely think that it is self-exploration, but also knowledge obtaining that we've talked about before, but as well as for seeing other people being at different points in my life that I've been and having a desire to connect with them, but also healing. I would say that if I had to choose any one word for my practice, it would be healing. I think that can be multifaceted and take on a lot of different versions of itself, a lot of different looks.
If I wasn't talking to witches, I wonder what the answer to that would be, because I feel like most of us are saying that.
Yeah. Maybe it's because there is a lot of healing that is needed going on, and honestly, for a long time has been well overdue. Maybe we're all just getting fed up with everything.
There's no maybe.
That's very true, very true. I think there's only so long that we can go on before we just start. We run out of spoons, and all we have left are knives. You know,
Yeah.
so
Who would you say are the three biggest influences on your practice?
I would definitely say my folk practices, so folks that I've grown up with, as well as so they can be my biological family. I would also say my chosen family. For me, my chosen family is just as strong to me as my biological family, and honestly sometimes even more so. And my communities that I belong to, I would say those three things. They're probably very broad things.
What is your favorite, like when you think back, either your favorite experience with witchcraft or the thing that went wrong and you think, well, that was dumb, but you're willing to share it?
I would say that in my life, my practice looks very different day to day, and part of my practice is what I've mentioned before of being a queer nun, being a sister, and one of the strongest things that I've seen before, which we have different ceremonies that we'll do, and often publicly, and each house, so each place, like in a state, and that's where like different people reside. We call them houses. Will have their own personal just things that they do. One of ours that we do here in Kentucky, we have something called the Veil of Shame, and we wear veils as nuns, and those veils, different colors, signify different levels. So if you are, like a novice, which means that you just like are working towards being a member. And really all that means is that you have a lot to learn, and you are learning from other people before you are given the full reign to go, all right, I'm a queer nun. You have a lot to learn from your community first. And anyway, so one of the things that we have is we have a veil of shame, and someone will wear literally a white veil that will cover themselves, and they will be taken through an event. So for example, at Pride, that's an example of one. And other people will be around them. So other nuns will be around them. And they'll have Sharpies of like different colors, or even just like red, things like that. And people that pass by are encouraged to write hurtful things that have been told to them, things that they think about themselves, very negative stuff. And they pour it all into this veil. And sometimes it's been done with a dress, like a white dress. And people will come and just mark literally on this person as they walk through the crowd, just like, the worst things they think about themselves, the worst things they've been told about themselves. And then later on in a ceremony, we take that and we bless it, and then we burn it. I think some of those times have been the most powerful for me is because of the connections you make with people and the release. They come up and they release those things about themselves. And then they're allowed to, they talk with us. They have community that validates that, hey, you are not these things. You are who you are. You are who you say you are. These are just things that other people have put on you, but you can take it off and you can transform it into something else.
I actually felt really anxious when you said they bless it.
Mm-hmm.
Like my anxiety ramped up.
Yeah.
Until you said burnt it, and then it was like, okay.
Yeah. So really blessing it is, I think that's something also in our community as like queer nuns, is when we bless something, it can be multiple things. You can bless something with an intention to uplift someone, or you can bless an object like that with an intent to release it. And we do a lot of that to be able to stay with our motto, which one of the things within our motto is expiate guilt and promulgate universal joy. So I really feel like those things, they deeply resonate with me, but it's wonderful to be able to see them in practice.
Love it.
Yeah.
What do you dislike about the witch community?
Well, I feel like we've talked about it a bit, but just, And see, I'm even having trouble now, like, just being open about it, just pouring myself out about it, being vulnerable. Um,
It's scary.
yeah, it's scary.
Well, I'll tell you, not very
Um,
many people listen to this show.
but even just like talking to just another person, so if we're talking to you, like live on another end, I find it very hard. But I really think that it is just not allowing ourselves to experience things whenever they are, of course, things that are allowed to be experienceable. So we're not talking about closed practices that belong to folks who are marginalized, but also just to understand things so that way we can have deeper respect for them, even if they are. So understanding it to some degree as to like, okay, why should I? But also like if you were doing, we even see that like in the Appalachian folk community, there have been like spats between authors because you're not doing Appalachian folk work right. And it's like, well, okay, a lot of it involves like you take a jar that's an old pickle jar and you put some dirt in it, things like that. You work with whatever you have on hand,
Yeah.
and that is like at the core of it. You work with whatever you have because sometimes you don't have anything.
Yep.
And to be able to tell someone, well, you're not doing it right because you're not using a ball jar, you're using a pickle jar, you know like it doesn't matter. Like I will go on ahead and say it.
You have
It
too
doesn't
much
matter.
money.
Right, exactly. Like, have you thought about the classist implications of that? Which, hello, we're in Appalachia. There's a lot of like low income, like, people who exist at a lower class here. But, of course, it's just like one example. But I think people getting too far in the weeds on other folks rather than trying to, with the object of coming together, and not even really coming together, but like existing peacefully together. You don't even have to like other people. You just don't have to retaliate against them. So I I think that again, like we've definitely talked about that a bit and touched on it, but other people scare me for those reasons. I've seen that a lot in the witch community, but I've seen it a lot in many communities. I don't think it's something that is just within our community. Yeah.
What
So
do you
stop
love
being
about us?
scary, everyone. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Quit making me afraid.
Right.
But what do you love about us?
I have also met some of the most wonderful people I've ever met in my life through witch communities, through spiritual communities. For example, I know I keep talking about them, but I feel like it is like they're a very good example of that. But my family member Corey, we met each other through the sisters. However, we both didn't really know that we were, you know, I was like, well, I'm a witch. Are you a witch? And they were like, yes.
Hmm.
Those kinds of things. Like other things bring you together. But we've bonded over that as well as over other things. And I just really enjoy the conversations we have. Like we have very deep, very thoughtful conversations. I also just love to be around anyone that I can just open up and talk about, like, hey, have you thought about like outer space before? Have you ever thought about how like that can have like spiritual connections and like why do we do these things? And or even just like walking through a graveyard and being like, I feel something here. Or just through the middle of the deep forest and being like, do you just like feel that energy here? What is that? And listening to it, and people not going, wow, you were something else. Let me tell you what, that's really weird. But just having those deep conversations with folks and allowing yourself to just go with the flow. I think like going with the flow is very important.
I can't wait till September.
Yeah, me
I can't
too.
wait to see
Honest.
other people experience this.
Yes. And I think that's also something that really touched me too, was whenever you were talking about being at Anahata's purpose and allowing yourself to go out in the river and cry for a long time. I was thinking that too, that I would love something like that where I can allow myself to just do that, because there's a lot of internal feelings that I have. And I honestly, even, starting testosterone aside, because actually,
Oh
weirdly
no, that
enough,
sounds like a shit show to experience.
well, it's weirdly enough, I used to make fun of people all the time being like, people with testosterone in their bodies have a hard time crying because of, and I'm like, no, it is no joke. I've had such a hard time. I
Really?
used to cry all the time at everything. And now I will be finding myself being like, I want to cry right now. Please cry. And I can't do it.
Hmm.
It's so strange. But I also have friends, for example, as well as myself. I actually have gone through HRT twice now, being an intersex person. I was forced to go through feminizing HRT whenever I was a minor. And I felt this, but I also have it validated with trans feminine friends who take estrogen, that whenever you take like estrogen and things like that, it really does allow you to cry more and feel your emotions more and be more in tune with them.
Huh.
And I miss that. I really, really miss like just going out somewhere and being like, I am gonna just let it all out and be very open with myself. 'Cause sometimes I think it's even hard to be open with my own self before I can be open with other people.
I have to laugh because I'm gonna ask Rachel to put it on the calendar, put it on the schedule.
Yes, please.
45-minute river crying.
45-minute river crying. Please bring tasty cake. Please bring snacks.
Followed by sound clearing, sound cleansing, sound bath.
Yes, that also sounded wonderful. I was like, that is genius
So
to
we go
have
to the
that.
shadow work class, then we go cry in the river, and then we get a sound bath, and then it's snack time around the fire.
Oh, oof. Come over to my house at snack time all the time. So we love that. But it's just, yeah, I am so excited. I will also say I was extremely surprised at how accessible it is. And that's, I think, going back on the point of things about witchy things, is I have wanted to go to classes before. I've wanted to go to retreats before, but then I will go look at the cost and be like, I will never be able to afford this.
Yes. Rachel made it a point to be
Yeah,
affordable.
I love that. And I loved listening to her section, to her talking to you about that on that episode, and really resonated with that. It also resonates with me in my own practice. Like whenever someone comes up to me and they're like, I need a house cleansing stat, but I'm like, I will do it. Let me know. You know, it's accessible. Like accessibility in multiple facets is important to me.
Is there anything that you wish more people were talking about or that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask?
Sure. I think so. I will probably take this time to talk just a little bit about something that is quite personal to me, but is also something that I witness. So, and it's kind of, honestly, it's witchy adjacent, but it can be applied to anything, even witchy spaces. And that is including trans people, non-binary people, gender non-conforming people in those spaces where they belong. I see it both within the queer community as well as outside of the queer community, all the way up to including, things that we see just in, just like in the news outlets, things like that, people not being allowed to use restrooms, all those kinds of things based on arbitrary things like body parts. And I constantly see people, more specifically trans feminine people, being barred from areas like women's workshops just because, other folks don't understand where we are coming from and who we are, as well as, just the fear. Like we've been talking about some fear throughout this entire program, but I think that's something that a lot of trans people deal with on a daily basis, is just being afraid to go to social spaces because of being rejected and furthermore being in harm's way. every year there are hundreds of trans people, more specifically trans feminine people, and even more specifically Black trans women and trans women of color who are murdered just for being in spaces where they should be and being in places where they should be allowed to exist. So although, it might not look at the surface, we're going to say, you're not allowed to be at this event, just please don't come here. Or even just saying something like, that's odd, why are you here? All those kinds of things can absolutely trickle down into things that make the safety issues and people being murdered happen in this world. So I just really like to, anytime I get the platform, challenge people whenever they are in those spaces, and if they feel a certain way, to really get to know trans folks, really get to understand us, and have not just compassion, but community with us. I think there's a lot that we bring to the table. And a lot of times we seek that community, but we are denied it. I could talk all day about that, but I won't.
I was pondering my thoughts on everything, so I'm still working things out.
Yeah, you're good.
I don't know. I just don't understand people very often. Very often I don't understand people. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Like, why do you care?
Yeah. Why is it such a big deal?
Yeah. So I was like trying to fathom who you were talking to and what they were thinking. And I'm like, I don't get it.
Honestly, I wish more people were like that.
Hopefully if someone sees me act in a different way, they call me on it so I can fucking deal with that.
Yeah. Well,
because I can't think of anything, but that doesn't mean I don't.
Yeah, and I have seen some of that out in the greater community, specifically like I mean, this is just an example. It's not saying all organizations are like that or whatever, what have you. But for example, like Dianic practices, I've seen some be like, all right, you have to be a woman with a vagina, with like uterus, all those kinds of things. All of these things you have to be able to just participate. I'm like, okay, is someone going around checking that? Yeah. No, let's hope not. But it's like,
my ultrasound.
What? Exactly. What if you are a woman and you don't have those things? Or
what if you're a
you
woman
can
and
even
you
be
fucking hate your uterus because it makes your life a goddamn
exactly
misery? How about
like
that?
what if you're a
Where
cis
do I
woman
fit
and
in?
you
I don't.
Exactly. So by those standards, like cis women do not fit in. They don't. And it really comes back down to, I mean, it comes to a lot of things like misogyny, trans misogyny specifically, but also
I just wanted to say, by the way, I'm not trying to make it about me. That just is a blurt that I was telling you about. So
no, you're fine. Totally. And that's very important because, there's even intersex women that are born with multiple different kinds of parts. For example, so I was raised as a woman. I am assigned female at birth, but I have different parts than what we think of as a cis woman would have. So even by that standard, if and I know other intersex women that are like that, but even by those standards, like intersex people, cis people who elect to have surgeries or even just have like medical conditions, people who've gone through menopause, all of those people, and specifically like it is used to bar trans women from those spaces. It also has a much wider reach and impact than people realize it does.
When I'm in a witch group and they start like celebrating their periods, I'm like, what periods are you having?
Right.
You obviously aren't having the same shit I'm dealing with.
Oh yeah, and I pride myself saying like, I am an intersex person, but I'm also a gender nonconforming trans masculine person. I have a period. They are hell because I have PCOS. Sometimes I just don't want to celebrate that because it causes me a lot of pain.
Yeah.
I wish I could. I wish it could be like a thing of empowerment, but even then it's like
it's just been so long. I just want some clean fucking cute underwear.
Yeah.
How much is that? I mean,
also
why?
as a fat person, I love the idea of like those thinks or like those underwear for, menstruation. They don't make them in my size.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool, all right. I guess fat people don't menstruate, but it's like, people, come on. Why do we care so much? Just
Yeah.
exist. Yeah, like on that note, my partner who is a binary trans man, he's been having a really hard time getting out in public spaces, do more so like impactful because of the pandemic and we stay home all the time, just because he's like, I am afraid of people caring too much. I was like, I just wish people that would come up to me, and if they misgender me or if they even have something, you know, to say about the way that I am presenting myself in public or being perceived. He's like, just don't perceive me. I don't want to be perceived anymore. Please don't perceive me. But also, just, why do you care? Just stop
Oh,
caring
my
about
response was shut the fuck up.
it. That's a good one.
Take your shit somewhere else. I don't fucking give a damn.
Yeah.
I'm busy. I'm just trying to fucking eat this goddamn sandwich.
Right. Like, right.
Go talk to that guy about what he looks like, because I don't give a shit. I'm fucking hungry.
It's like that meme, like, really, right here in front of my salad. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Who do you think I should have on the show?
Ooh. Well, one of the people that, sorry, that's a really hard question too, because I think there's so many interesting people out there. But one of the people that I have read his books, and he is also a Appalachian practitioner, like folk practitioner. He does a lot of really good writings about it, but is very approachable, is very, like, just a great person. His name is Jake Richards, and he's the author of Backwoods Witchcraft, which is conjure and folk magic from Appalachia. Yeah.
I'm embarrassed that I didn't know who that was immediately.
He also has a newer book out called Doctoring the Devil, Notebooks of an Appalachian Conjure Man. And does a lot of really good writings. He has received he's one of the recipients of those kinds of things we've talked about before, where, people will come up and be like, you're not doing it exactly how I do it, so therefore it is not
You're not
isn't
a real Appalachian witch.
Yeah, you're not a real Appalachian witch, like, you're not a real granny witch, you're not a real conjure person, which, conjure, of course, has multiple different types depending on where you're at in the US. But there is also Appalachian conjure, which is also something I practice, something that my family has practiced. But he takes those things in stride, and he's just a really, really good human being. I would, would really love to hear more interviews, or people invite him to interviews, because often I haven't really heard a lot about that, or like, I don't see things where we were thinking about other people in the Appalachian folk magic community. And sometimes it does feel a little bit like a kind of like a popularity game for some folks, whenever in reality it's about the practice, and Jake is about the practice, from what I can tell. And I've, read both of his books. They're both great, but also have interacted with him like in other settings. So yeah.
Cool. I'll put him on my list of books that I need to read so I can have the author on. Gosh, it's getting long. Would you please recommend something to the listeners?
So if I had to recommend anyone read anything, I would definitely say try reading Backwoods Witchcraft, Conjure and Folk Magic from Appalachia by Jake Richards, because it does give a good entry level view into Appalachian folk practices, the way in which we refer to granny magic or conjure. And of course, like, take that with a grain of salt. I say that with everybody's practice, including my own. But it gives you, if you're interested in those kinds of things, it really gives you a good overview and a good starting point. If you're also interested in folk practices. Another good thing to read is The Foxfire, which isn't a
Yes.
witchy books per se. Yeah, but it's a
Not intentionally, maybe.
yeah, not intentionally, but there's a lot in there, which I find a lot of fellow Appalachians, whenever they want to go back to their roots, they begin reading that. And of course, Appalachia isn't, whenever we think of Appalachia, whenever we talk about it, a lot of folks think that Appalachia is solely and specifically white, and it is not. There are, definitely Black folks who are Appalachian, people of color, Indigenous people who are Appalachian. And that's one of the wonderful things about Appalachia. The beauty of Appalachia is that our culture comes from many different parts, made up of many different people who have not only survived either in close proximity or together with each other, but thrived. And our thriving might not look, on the outside the same as, other people who might be higher in socioeconomical class, but we're definitely thriving. We definitely have our own works, our own things to be proud of. So that's where I would suggest starting.
Now, finally, would you please tell me a story that you love to tell?
Okay.
About anything at all.
Anything at all?
Yeah, doesn't have to be witchy at all. It could be anything. As long as you like telling the story.
I think that one's hard too. I also I love telling stories. I love listening to stories.
Me too, which is why this podcast exists.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that. Let's see. Truth be told, like, I am usually full of like stories just because like there's so much weird, pardon my French, weird shit that happens to me in my life. But the one that is oddly enough surfacing to my memory right now, and it's just a dumb little story too, but was when I was younger, my family, so myself, my brother, my mom, and my dad, we all decided to go to Disney World. And then my aunt, who I'm very close to, she also decided to come down. So she was just like, hey, actually, I've got some time. And for some reason, I have like free airfare right now. So I'm going to come down and like spend the week with y'all too. And we were like, what the heck? So this is like, once in a lifetime, like we are doing this really cool vacation for like our kids, even though I'm sure my parents are still probably paying that thing off. Mm-hmm. But we got to the airport to pick up my aunt. And this is a story that's told in my family, even to this day, even though it happened like 15 years ago.
I love.
Okay, so we were like in the Orlando airport, I'm pretty sure, and there was like this it was where the arrivals were coming in, and we were standing down on this lower level, and up above us was this like ledge with a glass, there's like a glass railing, and you could see people getting off and either walking down the stairs or coming down the elevator. And my mom saw someone who looked like my aunt, which my aunt's name is Aunt Debbie. I feel like everyone has an Aunt Debbie, or at least knows an Aunt Debbie. But my Aunt Debbie, or who we thought was my Aunt Debbie, got onto the elevator. And we all stood in front of the elevator doors. I don't know what behooved us. And we thought it was just her on the elevator because everyone else was going down the stairs. Everyone else was like, I'm not going to wait for that. She got on the elevator, and so we thought, and the doors opened, and we all just yelled at this random person, like, hello, Aunt Debbie. And then my mom all of a sudden goes, so I am autistic. I'm very sure my mom is autistic as well. She just goes very loudly, well, who are you? You're Aunt Debbie. Where the hell is Aunt Debbie? I was like, this poor person, these doors are opening on their, just from their point of view. And they're like, hello, Aunt Debbie. Wait, who the hell are you? You're not Aunt Debbie. And then we just walk away. And they're like, what has happened? So it is definitely a common saying in my family now. Like whenever you open a door to someone, to just scream, like, "Who the hell are you? You're not Aunt Debbie." And
That is exactly
yeah.
the kind of story that I want at the end of every episode.
Yeah, so, you know, if you're just like, you go and you have an awkward social interaction with somebody, you can always just like finish it with like, "Well, who the hell are you? You're not Aunt Debbie," and then just walk off, you know? I feel like, if anything, it will blind them with confusion and you can escape very
Yes.
quickly, very peacefully.
Ooh. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
You know, thank you for having me. It has been such a pleasure.
Oh, yay.
And for listening to all of my harebrained ideas. So,
Well, I will see you next year.
yes, most definitely.
And maybe around the internet. Maybe you'll pop in.
Yes, I'm trying to get much better at doing that. I have recently joined the fantabulous public Witch Bitch Facebook group, which
Yay!
I enjoy everything that is on there. Let me tell you, I've been in a lot of witchy groups over the years on Facebook.
Wait, are you in the
And
coven?
Yeah, yes. And that, like, the coven is a really great space to be in. I can honestly say I thoroughly enjoy like everything that people post in there. And I just
Yay!
love seeing the interaction people have with each other. Like, it's so genuine, but it's also uplifting, and I feel like it is a space you don't have to be afraid to go outside your internet door, you know?
It's such a good
So,
group.
yeah.
I love it so much. And I love it even more, and you will too after September.
Yes.
I don't know if I just said like regular English words just then. I feel like I didn't.
What is regular English words? We can make up anything. It's all right. Add it to the dictionary.
Okay, well then I will see you in the coven.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Your Average Witch. You can find us all around the internet on Instagram at Your Average Witch Podcast, Twitter at Average Witch Pod, Facebook at facebook.com/Your Average Witch Podcast, at YourAverageWitchPodcast.com, and at your favorite podcast service. Want to help the podcast grow? Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You just might hear your review read at the end of the next episode. If you'd like to recommend someone for the podcast, like to be on it yourself, or if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, send an email to youraverageWitchPodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Your Average Witch. You can find us all around the internet on Instagram at Your Average Witch Podcast, Twitter at Average Witch Pod, Facebook at facebook.com/Your Average Witch Podcast, at YourAverageWitchPodcast.com, and at your favorite podcast service. Want to help the podcast grow? Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You just might hear your review read at the end of the next episode. If you'd like to recommend someone for the podcast, like to be on it yourself, or if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, send an email to YourAverageWitchPodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the moon changes.